Besides stalling, stopping and starting on a hill is another great challenge that faces new and inexperienced motorcycle riders. Hello ladies and gents, Reluctant Biker here, and today I'm coming to you with a video on how to stop and start or take off on a hill. I will start by stating from the onset of this video that some of my instructions in this video are quite repetitive, but with a good reason, for as you probably know, repetition at times is quite necessary for learning. This video is a follow-up to the video I posted almost a year ago on how to avoid stalling a motorcycle. Right from the start, I want to point out to all of you that I'm not a certified motorcycle instructor. I am merely a fellow biker sharing with you a few tips that I've learned from my riding experience and that have worked for me so far. If you have not already taken a motorcycle riding course, I strongly encourage you to take one as soon as possible. No YouTube videos can ever replace the guidance of a properly trained instructor. Your life is your life, as Charles Bukowski once said. Be on the watch. I'll begin by going over how to stop on a hill and what to do when stopping uphill. Then we'll take a look at how to take off from a hill or incline under different scenarios, such as how to take off on a right turn from a stop sign on an incline, and what to do when stopping uphill on a bike that is heavy, requiring you to keep both feet on the ground. If you're interested in this, please stick around and we are going to get started. Thank you. In this first scenario, I'm going to present you with the ideal situation, which I define as the best way for a rider to stop and take off from a hill. When stopping uphill, decelerate or slow down completely. By the time you stop, you should be in first gear. Thus, always be sure you are in first gear when stopped on a hill. This will prevent any stalling or taking off issues. A side note here, when going uphill, switch to a lower gear. I usually keep my 750 on the second or third gear. If the hill is steep, never lug the engine of the bike at a higher gear when riding up an incline. As you probably well know, lugging is when you feel a certain roughness or jerking come from the engine because you are in a gear that is too high for the current speed of the bike. In short, your engine speed and road speed do not match, so the engine huffs and puffs to let you know that it's hurting. Here is a word of caution. Just be aware that if you use the engine, that is the friction zone, to keep your bike stopped by holding the clutch pressed in the friction zone, you could cause the clutch to overheat, especially if your bike operates with a dry clutch. Now, not to digress, but I need to explain to you that the type of clutch your bike has affects both how you operate your bike and the bike itself. Now, most motorcycles come either with a dry clutch or a wet clutch. Bikes with dry clutches do not like riders slip in the clutch or feather in the clutch, two terms which basically refer to the act of keeping the clutch in the friction zone, but not fully releasing it. In contrast, motorcycles with wet clutches tolerate slip in the clutch. That is, a biker's act of using the friction zone to hold their position and thus control their bikes. This is due to the fact that wet clutches are soaked in engine oil, which is, I assume, why they're called wet, and are easier to pull than the dry clutches. My previous bike, the TU250X, had a wet clutch. This current bike, the Moto Guzzi V7 3-stone, comes with a dry clutch. Therefore, in an ideal situation, when you stop uphill, you should be using only the brakes to both of the brakes, the front and the rear, individually or together, to keep the bike in place, not the friction zone via the clutch, because that's bad for the clutch. This is the technique I use, what I like to call as the ideal situation technique. So please follow along, and I'm going to show you exactly the steps I take to stop my bike on a hill and then take off. Alright, ladies and gents, I am going to demonstrate for you the first scenario, which I call the ideal situation and the ideal way to stop on a hill and take off from it. Alright, it's coming to... Okay, beautiful. Alright, let's try it now. As I indicated earlier, when going uphill, you want to be in a lower gear just to avoid lugging the engine. So this is a typical hill. It is not the it's not a terrible hill, but it is a hill nonetheless, and will do for our demonstrations. So when you stop on a hill like this, obviously you have a stop sign over there, and as you can see, obviously you have the clutch pulled in. You want to make sure you are in the first gear always and forever, and even if you don't stop on the first gear, just make sure once you stop, make sure you are in the first gear, because again, you don't want to experience any stalling, any takeoff issues, because you find out that you stopped in third gear or fourth gear. Alright, so here is the ideal situation. This bike is pretty heavy, and this actually technique works for me. You have your left leg firmly planted on, well, left foot firmly planted on the ground, and you have, and as you can see, I'm not actually, my right hand is not on the front brake lever, so I'm not pulling it. I'm using my rear brakes to stop the bike, to keep the bike stationary, stopped on the hill. And this actually works for me precisely because, and I really love this technique precisely because, and again, as you can see, I'm also looking at my mirrors just to make sure that I don't have any incoming traffic, but this free hand here allows me to actually take off pretty quickly in case of an emergency. And sometimes you do have, you know, drivers behind you that harass you, and so on and so forth. So this technique works wonders for me. I really love it. And again, what you want to do, again, pull the clutch in, make sure you're in the first gear, and of course your left leg firmly planted on the ground and your right leg is on the rear brake. That way you can maintain the balance of the bike, you can keep the bike in the proper position, and thus freeing your right hand, which enables you to just really roll on the throttle when the time comes. Alright, and of course always make sure that you're good to go, look in all directions necessary, and then just roll on the throttle. Voila, just so. Ladies and gents, I'm going to demonstrate again the first technique on how to stop and take off from a hill or incline. And again, this is what I call my ideal way or method of stopping on the hill and taking off from it. Okay, always make sure you are in a lower gear. Well, know your bike. You will know which gear your bike really needs to climb a given hill. So again, as you can see, let me show you the method. Clutch pulled in, left leg firmly planted on the ground, and you have the right leg on your rear brake. Just gently
gently press on it and it keeps the bike stationary. This is again the ideal technique precisely because it allows for a quick takeoff. There are no second guesses here. If you have a crazy driver behind you, something is going on there and you really need to take off, this will give you that freedom. Okay, this technique is preferred amongst, and obviously if you're a seasoned rider, you kind of know this and you probably have your own technique. And I'm going to tell you right now that I'm going to share with you 3 to 4 strategies today, and I use a combination of them. Again, it depends on the circumstances, but most of the time, this is what I use. This is the technique I actually use, and I really love it. All right, and it works. And there you go. Just make sure everything all is clear. Good. All right.
But some of us do not ride in ideal situations. So let's take a look at a few of those situations. What do you do when stopping uphill on a bike that is heavy, requiring you to keep both of your feet on the ground, and you're afraid of stalling the bike? In fact, this is a question that Annie Too Fabulous, a YouTube user and a fellow rider, asked in one of my previous videos. She asked, on going up a hill from a stop, what do you do when you're short and the bike is heavy? I need to keep both of my feet planted, and if I do it your way, I'll lose my balance. Any advice? She said. Now let me start by explaining to you what Annie meant by "if I do it your way." In one of my previous videos titled "How Not to Stall a Motorcycle on Takeoffs," I went over the strategy I just illustrated to you, that when stopping on a hill, I tend to apply the rear brake to maintain the bike in position and prevent it from rolling backwards. A move that allows my right hand to hold the throttle grip and thus be free to roll on it when taking off. I suggested this move specifically to those riders who still grapple with the issue of stalling their bikes. Now, let's address Annie's issue on what to do when stopping uphill on a bike that is heavy, requiring a rider to keep both feet on the ground. Having thought about it for a while, and after having considered all I have learned about dealing with hills from my riding experience, I have 2 tips, neither of which is ideal. My first tip is to use the friction zone to hold your position. That is, to hold your bike in place, since you need to keep both of your feet on the ground. This frees up your right hand to focus on the throttle only, instead of both the throttle and the front brake lever, a skill you'll have to acquire with experience. Now, if your bike has a wet clutch, then using the friction zone to hold your position should not worry you about damaging the clutch. If, on the other hand, your bike has a dry clutch, still use the friction zone, but with moderation. Please follow me along and I will show you exactly step by step what to do.
Alright, ladies and gents, now I am going to demonstrate the first tip on what to do when stopping uphill on a bike that is too heavy, requiring you to keep both feet firmly planted on the ground. Alright, so again, this is tip number 1, how to use the friction zone. Alright, here we are, stopped uphill. Okay, so again, this is in response to Annie's concern. So if you're riding a bike that is too heavy and that requires you to keep both feet planted on the ground. So here's tip number 1. This is the first thing, the first tip. This is what you can do. One is to use the friction zone to maintain the bike in position. Alright, so again, right now I'm using the front brake, but you can use the friction zone. And again, all you're doing really is engaging, just gently release the clutch, okay, while at the same time rolling on the throttle ever so gently to keep the bike in place. And right now, actually, you see I am rolling on throttle gently and releasing the clutch. I have engaged right now I've engaged the engine, and there we go. Just gently. You have to kind of get used to this and practice in the parking lot. But as I mentioned, if your bike has a dry clutch, please do this with moderation, because a dry clutch tends to burn up, and you sometimes, especially on hot days, you're going to actually be able to smell the burnt, as I sometimes do mine when I'm caught in traffic. There we go. This, again, it's not an ideal way, but it's definitely a sure way of keeping your bike in place, keeping your bike balanced, allowing you to use both of your feet to maintain it in position. And do not worry, I'm looking in my mirrors trying to see if there are any cars behind me, but no, there aren't. Alright, so now we have a car coming, and voila, let's go. All you gotta do now, release the clutch. And roll on your throttle. Alright, ladies and gents, I am going to again demonstrate the first tip on how to stop your motorcycle on a hill and how to take off it. Again, this is in direct response to the concern of what to do and how to handle this when your bike is too heavy, requiring you to keep both of your feet planted on the ground. And again, here is the process. The process is very, very simple. Gently release your clutch, engage the friction zone, and as you do that, just roll on the throttle. Give it just a tiny bit gas, and sometimes you can find the actually the equilibrium where you just keep both hands just so, and the bike stays in place. It doesn't move forward or backwards, because you have again, everything is coming together. The pull of the bike backwards, the engine engagement, and the acceleration, all of them are in proper harmony right now. They're all pulling at each other at equal measure, I suppose. Again, I'm no physicist, but the bike stays in place. Now, if I roll off the throttle, all right. There we go. Just gently, just so. Alright, and then just take off. Just make sure, of course, that all is clear, and take off.
My second tip is to use the front brakes by learning how to transition dexterously or skillfully your right hand from holding the front brake lever to keep the bike in position to rolling on the throttle grip to get your bike moving and prevent it from stalling. Now, this requires a bit of practice, so please follow along and I will show you how to do it.
Alright, ladies and gents, now we're going to address the second tip, the second way riders such as Annie can stop their bikes on a hill when they have to keep both legs firmly planted on the ground. Again, this is not the ideal situation. The ideal situation, again, the ideal way of stopping a bike on a hill and taking off is if you use your rear brake with your right foot. But that's okay. that's okay. So if you are required, if your bike is too heavy and you kind of need to keep both feet firmly planted on the ground, the first tip or the first way to do it is by, again, using the friction zone, and the second way to do it is the one I'm going to show you right now. It's just let's get on with it, shall we? Again, this is a technique that you were in fact taught when you took your riding course, and the technique is very simple, and it is for those people who need or feel like they need to keep both feet planted on the ground when reaching up a hill or when stopping on a hill, and just because for various reasons, like the bike's too heavy. The first tip was to use the friction zone. The second tip is to actually use your front brakes. And I know this is the hardest one and the one I really don't like, because initially when I was learning how to ride, my confusion was this. Well, when stopping at a stop sign or traffic lights, I really was confused because I wasn't dexterous or skillful enough to actually kind of be able to employ the front lever, brake lever, and the throttle to roll on the throttle grip at the same time, or rather in a way that is kind of skillful. All right, so that's what I would recommend you do. You practice with it. This is really a good and easy way also. So your clutch is pulled in. Always make sure that you are in fact in first gear, and just pull in the front brake lever. Just pull it in. Now here is what you're going to do. When the time comes for you to go, of course, always make sure you are doing that. Just roll gently, just so. Okay? Release and roll. Gently again. Roll just so. Gently. Alright? And I'm also going to actually demonstrate it for you. There's a car coming. Just I'm going to demonstrate it for you again. Again, the procedure is very simple. Your fingers are actually, and always make sure that you learn or are in the habit of actually braking with all your fingers. You're going to see sometimes me probably in any of in my other videos trying to brake with two fingers. Bad habit. Very bad habit. Don't develop that bad habit. Just getting used to braking with all your four fingers, and of course, you know, your thumb and so on. So use your full hand. That's basically my point. So again, just try to make the switch between the brake lever. Again, when the time comes for you to go, just again, as you release the front brake lever, just roll on the throttle, just so. Okay, don't do this and then do this, because that's what happened to me previously. Again, I would initially, when I was not as skillful as I am now, and again, by no means I feel that I've mastered the art of riding, just well enough not to get into an accident. But again, all you're doing is releasing the front brake lever and rolling on the throttle gently. Again, releasing. Again, simultaneously, do not lift your fingers up. Just roll on it. As you release, roll on it. Roll on it. There we go. And get going.
Alright, ladies and gents, we have reached the third and last scenario that I'm going to address in this video. And this scenario is actually one that was raised by a YouTube user on one of my other videos, where he asked, how would you take off on a right turn from a stop sign on an incline? Also, in Ontario, it's frowned on to have both feet on the ground. I believe, he said, you actually lose points on the test if your right foot comes off the peg. Only the left foot is allowed off the peg at stops. So this is the scenario that the YouTube user MXJ Richard raised for me, and I'm going to address it in this video. So please follow along.
Alright, ladies and gents, let's see how that is done. Alright. Oops. Alright, so first things first, always we're here on top of a hill at a stop sign, and we are, of course, we're going to signal to the right because that's where we intend to go. Again, always make sure that you are in first gear. Now, again, according to our Ontario friend Richard, a YouTube user who made a comment on one of my videos, the comment to which I'm actually directly responding to right now. In Ontario, it's frowned upon to have both of your feet on the ground, according to him. I'm not quite sure. I do not know the laws and regulations there. So, okay, it's fine. So you've got your right foot on the rear brake, left leg on the ground. You got your clutch pulled in, and all you got to do really is same principle as the ideal principle. It's just roll on the throttle and make the turn. Look where you're going and go there. There we go. And shift up. There we go.
Ladies and gents, we have reached the end of this video, and I would like to take a moment and thank you all for joining me today. I would like to also just remind you that this channel was initially designed to help other fellow motorcyclists and or those who are thinking of joining our community. So please feel free to leave any comment or feedback if you feel that it might be helpful to someone out there. Again, I hope all of you are enjoying this this beautiful summer, and until next time, be well. Ciao.